Really do.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ken, and I'm a sometimes grateful, usually happy member of Al-Anon. And thank you, Wendy, for asking me to do this. Like many of the other speakers, I had 4 years to prepare, and the talk I would have given 3 years ago is a lot different than the one I'm going to give today. And the talk I gave in my room 20 minutes ago is a lot different than the one I'm going to give now. And the talk I'm going to give after, when I'm done, is going to be the best one you've never heard. And I am a member of Al-Anon. And that has some parameters with me. I have a home group. My home group is a Serenity Unbound Al-Anon family group. We meet on Zoom. My home group is a Zoom meeting. But I also I have a commitment to myself to go to at least one live meeting a week in my area. And I do that because I need people. I need that. When this happened in 2020 and the world shut down, and I have a friend of mine who says, God goes ahead and plans in love, and Zoom happened. And, I started to meet people from all over the world and go to meetings with people from all over the world. And it's been absolutely wonderful. I hate these lights. You can't see half the people out there. Anyway. But I absolutely love that. But I missed being with people. And in Zoom, it's great. Pants are optional. But I missed being with people, And this convention is really special to me. When Wendy asked me to do this, it would have been, if I would have spoken here in 2020, it would have been 50 years since I went to my first ORC. Yeah. So as of right now, I've been in Al-Anon a little over 53 years, and I stress this in a row. Because there's, I truly believe that's important. It's in a row. And I'm here to tell you that this stuff works. It works. It works. And I'm going to do what a lot of people have said. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I was like. The book doesn't say, in the book, we're not supposed to talk about Al-Anon, but the book says what I was like, not what it was like, or what we were like. It doesn't say what it was like. Because as our Al-Anon speaker yesterday very eloquently said, it says, it was not my problem, because when it changed, I didn't. I haven't lived with an alcoholic on purpose since I was 18 years old. I stress on purpose because there's been a couple of accidental ones. One was a roommate. One was a stepson, and when he moved out, I didn't live with alcoholism again for a long time. And then a couple of years ago, when he was sober for a while, and a couple of years ago, my wife, we were talking about it and everything, and he was trying to, get reacquainted with AA and everything. And I said, well, I said, he's not moving back in. So he did. Because I have that much control in my house. And my wife's also a black belt Al-Anon person, Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't do that. If you're out there, alcoholics, don't marry an Al-Anon. We're horrible to marry. Ask my wife will tell you the same thing. So it's like, it's like we have the same weapons we throw at each other. Like if I'm living with I trained my whole life to live with an alcoholic, and I go and marry an Al-Anon. I was training for this. Since I was 11 years old, I was training. I'm going to live with an alcoholic. I'm going to, probably marry someone in AA and everything, and all that stuff, because I know how to do that. But you marry an Al-Anon. If I say to my wife, you may be right, she goes, oh, you're just placating. Or she says it to me. You say it to an alcoholic, they go, oh, I'm right. Yay. I just ruined it for all the Al-Anons out there now. Next time you say that to an alcoholic, they're going to know. But there's hardly any AAs in this room anyway, so don't worry about it. Anyway, I grew up I was born in New Brunswick. And it's an alcoholic province. In Brunswick, you can either be an alcoholic or live with one. There's no two ways around it. And my father was an alcoholic, and I have 10 brothers and sisters. And we, I was born in New Brunswick, and when I remember, they say alcoholism is a progressive disease, and I remember growing up, and I remember my dad was, just this. I remember walking to the beach and holding my dad's hand, and him had that smelly cigar he had and everything like that, because we lived, right near the bay in northern New Brunswick, and we'd walk to the beach and everything with the kids, and we'd go out and Sunday stuff and everything like that, and Sunday drives. And then I also remember those days weren't, they didn't end quite as good as they started. We'd go to visit cousins or something like that, and then my dad and his cousins or whatever, and his relatives and everything, they'd start drinking, and then coming home was a lot different than going there. The anticipation of going there and having fun, and then the coming home with whatever. And when I was 8 years old, we moved to Toronto, the big city. I lived in a small town, and we moved to Toronto, this huge city, and I didn't fit. I didn't know anybody. I had that East Coast accent, and didn't, made fun of and everything like that in school. And we moved on to a street where, and I look up and down that street now, and I don't know of any that weren't alcoholic on that street. It was an alcoholic neighborhood. My dad just knows how to pick them. And we moved to Toronto. My dad worked for the LCBO, Liquor Control Board of Ontario, for those of you from out of the town. So so he had the perfect job for an alcoholic, the keys to the kingdom. And I know the loneliness. I know the self-pity. I know the hatred. I know the loathing that goes not only for the person that's drinking, but for myself. I had all that stuff for myself as well. And the other thing is there's an awful word going around Al-Anon right now, qualifier. My qualifier. I qualify for Al-Anon on my own. I am my own qualifier. And thank God I do, because if I need you to get better, if I have a qualifier, I need them to get better for me to get better. Because that's what I always thought. If he only stopped drinking, if he only didn't drink, then I would be better. If I wasn't there, it'd be better. I haven't lived with an alcoholic on purpose since I was 18. I brought me with me everywhere I went. I needed to get better. If I need you to get better for me to get better, I can't. I can recover from my own disease. I can't recover from yours. And that's the important thing for me to remember. And when I was younger, that's what we did. And it was, anyway, in my house, we were 13 people going in 13 different directions. 11 kids, 2 adults. Moved to Toronto into a 3-bedroom house with 1 bathroom. Yeah, I know, right? 1,100 square foot house, unfinished basement. When I finally did move out of there, I don't know if the bathroom in the basement was fully finished yet. I don't know if all 4 walls were up still. We lived in an alcoholic house. And but we didn't talk. We had a couple of rules in our house. There's nothing wrong, and we're not talking about it. That's one of them. And whoever yelled the loudest was the rightest. And I brought that into life, into my marriage for quite a while. I'm not quite as bad as that anymore. I believe that Al-Anon is an as much program. I still do a lot of the same things. I don't do them as much, as often, or as severe. And that's important for me. I was talking to a guy just probably about a year ago, and we were talking, and he was talking about how he had this horrible slip. AA's is easy, man. If you drink, that's your slip. Go rob a bank, beat your wife, smack your kids around, that's okay. As long as I didn't drink, I'm good. Al-Anon, we're so hard on ourselves. Right? And he came up to me, he goes, and he said, I just had a bad slip today, he says. And his sister, who's one of the alcoholics in his life, came over to the house and was just off on a bender and just was horrible, and he lost it on her. All right? we were talking and everything, and he says, yeah, as soon as she left, he says, I prayed about it, and I called my sponsor and talked to him about it and everything like that. And I said, man, that's not a slip, that's recovery. That's recovery. When I do something differently than I did before, that's called recovery. It's not a slip if I make a mistake. It's a slip if I live there. If I do something differently now, that's recovery. It's the same in AA. It's recovery. You know, in our step 12, it says, I try and I practice. I never perfect this stuff. You know, step 12 is the human step of us. I try and I practice. I try to carry the message and I practice the principles. I never perfect it. Anyway, I came in here when I was 11, so that's it for the before. You know, my drunkalog is over, and buckle up. That's anytime you hear an alcoholic say, you know, like, okay, you know, I've talked enough about the drinking. You know, I'm going to move on to recovery. To buckle up, because you know there's another 20 minutes of drinking coming up. And so anyway, I came to my first meeting when I was 11 years old, in September of 1969, and my friend Rick brought me to my first meeting. Can't thank him enough. Changed my life. Changed his too. I knew I'd cry at some point today. Didn't know it would be this early. But what happened was in 1968, then his mom, who was an Al-Anon member and an Alateen sponsor, not at that time, but there was a convention, Alateen convention came into Toronto, and she brought a couple of kids from Kalamazoo, Michigan, into her house. And we lived down the street, and they ended up going to the convention with a couple of my brothers and sisters went with them too, and they started going to Alateen, and I wasn't old enough yet. And I truly believe I wasn't, you know. And I couldn't have done anything. But when I was 11, they finally said, you know, you can come with us now. And I started going to that meeting on Thursday nights. And I went to that meeting for 10 years to Cedarbury Alateen, and loved it. Absolutely loved it. Just had a wonderful time, made great friends. Still have some of those friends today, you know. And when I was in Alateen and early Al-Anon, I mean, there's a couple of guys sitting over there that we've been friends for 45 years. And I always say, when you're in Alateen, you can either graduate to Al-Anon or flunk to AA. So Chris and Marty are close to 40 years sober, both of them. You know, found this stuff early. You know, and you know, but just the friendships and everything that I have from back then, I still have today. I still have today. Friends in recovery. You know, and you can't dream that stuff up. It just happens. It's organic. And whenever we get together, something special happens. So we were together yesterday for about 3 or 4 hours. There was a few of us, and just laughing and joking and having fun and reminiscing, and then talking about the stuff that's going on today too. You know, talking about the real stuff. That's what I can do with these guys, that I can talk about the real stuff. I couldn't do that before. Remember, there's nothing wrong, we're not talking about it. You know, well, there's nothing wrong, we're not talking about it. Anyway, I forgot to tell you, but, you know, being a member of Al-Anon, I have a home group. I have a sponsor. I sponsor other guys, and when I sponsor guys, I take them through the steps. That's why I sponsor them. I sponsor to take them through the steps, not to be a sounding board on everything, but to take them through the steps. And that's what we do, is we go through the steps. And thanks to the advent of Zoom, I got a guy I sponsor in Florida, and I have met him. You know, he came up to an event at my place last year, and we've actually met in person. But I've been sponsoring him for a couple of years, and I got another guy that I sponsor in France. Never met him. He's English, so you know, we don't have a language barrier. And even if I was from Quebec and he was French, we'd still have a language barrier because it's a completely different French. But with the advent of Zoom, that happens, you know. And what do? We have our times. We meet once a week and we go over the steps. We're going through the steps. And to be able to hear someone's fifth step is absolutely amazing. absolutely amazing to share that with someone, to watch the growth and just have somebody just unburden themselves to you. It's absolutely amazing. It's such a gift that I've been given from you guys. Anyway, when I was, like I said, I came to this convention in 1970 for the first time at the Royal York. And when I was asked to speak here, it would have been 50 years since I came. It was the first time I've ever been nervous about talking anywhere because of that. But then I had 4 years to prepare and forgot all about it, because who knows if it's ever going to come back. And here we are, and I'm just loving it. Anyway, when I was 21 years old, they do what they do, and they kicked me out of Al-Anon. And out of Alateen, and there's whole pamphlets now and books and everything on transitioning. When Rick and I transitioned, 1 week we're in Alateen, the next week we're in Al-Anon. There you go, up the stairs, So I went up the stairs and into the Al-Anon, or the Cedarburg Al-Anon, because that's what. And what was wonderful when we were in Alateen is we had joint meetings once a month, and every time there was 5 Thursdays in a month, we would have a joint meeting with the Al-Anons. And one time the Alateens would chair, the next time the Al-Anons would chair, and we got to know each other. So I knew these women. And when I went in there, and I was the only guy, I was the youngest person. Everyone else, the other women, they're all over 30. Some of them were older than that. But, we lovingly called it the blue room because of the rinse in their hair. And I said that one time when I was speaking, and there was a couple of the women in the room, and they'd never heard me say that before. So I got it my next meeting. I went to my home group. But I went up there, and they welcomed me immediately. And first they said, what are you doing? Do you have an announcement or something? I go, no, I turned 21. I'm here now. So I turned 21 December 20th. So whatever the Thursday was after the 20th of December, I went to Al-Anon. And that's how I transitioned from Alateen to Al-Anon. It was it was traumatic for me, because all my friends were just down the stairs. But I wasn't with them anymore. But I was with new friends. And these women just, and I felt really out of place for probably about 6 weeks, 2 months. And I realized it was me feeling out of place, not them not welcoming me. They welcomed me with open arms and loved me just like my Alateen friends did, and I came to love that group. And then I switched groups a couple of times. I went to another one, and it seemed like I always picked Thursday night groups. So I never got to see Happy Days live. I was going to meetings. And it's funny, because sometimes, even today, sometimes I forget there are some people I meet that don't go to meetings, because I've just done it for 53 years. And even when I was in Alateen, we'd go to 3 or 4 meetings a week. I can get by on one. I get better when I go to more. And I had a sponsor in Alateen and everything like that, a couple of them, but we never really did anything, And I mistook the relief I was getting for recovery. I thought I was in recovery. I was in relief. I was going to the meetings. I don't get recovery from reading a book. I don't get recovery from coming to a meeting. I don't get recovery from talking to someone just in unburdening myself. I get recovery when I work through the steps. And when I work through the steps, something magical happens. But I had to get that God gift, that gift of desperation that I got. And what happened with me is I had a sister who passed away 35 years ago or so. And she was, and she was one of the ones also who brought me to my first meeting. And I always say, I came to my first meeting with a friend of mine and my sister, and that was a sister and she passed away of cancer really quickly, really suddenly. So we found out on a Wednesday she had cancer. A week and a half later, on Monday, she passed away. And she was in the hospital that time, and we sat with her and went to the ICU room and everything like that. But it was quick. And I never got to say all the things I needed to say to her. And I realized that then. And that was my gift of desperation. And I got a sponsor and asked him to take me through the steps. I wanted something more. I was pretending to be as happy as you guys were. I was pretending. I was dying inside, but I was pretending. And I realized how much that that I missed, doing that. So I started going through the steps, and step one is amazing. Step one is magic, and the steps aren't easy. We call it working the steps, working the program. I'm not in the program, I'm in the fellowship. I work a program designed for living, and it's uncomfortable sometimes to do these steps. And me, when I fold my hands like this, I have my left thumb over my right thumb. If I go like that with my right thumb over my left thumb, it's uncomfortable. And holding it like that, and see some of you doing it, holding it like that is really weird. It's not feeling great. But that's what sometimes working the steps is like. I got to do something, get out of my comfort zone and do something different because what I was doing was not working. But the first step, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. And for those of you who don't know in AA, the 12 steps are exactly the same. One word is different in we carry the message to others, you carry the message to alcoholics. Other than that, the steps are exactly the same. We work the same steps. We just have a slightly different perspective of it. In your own book, you're basically selfish, self-centered, and self-seeking. It says so in the book. I'm not telling you anything. But if you don't know it, read the book. And in AA, you work the program so that you work these steps so you can be a bit more see more and be of service to more people, other people. I'm, you-centered, you-centric, and everything, and I need to work the program so I can learn to see myself better, and it's just that little. I always give the visual, especially to double winners when they come into Al-Anon and everything, and there's a few different things. Like there's a couple of differences between AA and Al-Anon. First of all, anybody can join AA, right? And desire to stop drinking. In Al-Anon, you got to know somebody. Because our tradition is you got to have a problem of alcoholism, a relative or friend. So you got to know somebody to get in our room. We're a little more exclusive. But the main thing is, and every time I say this, alcoholics get resentful. They get a resentment. So and I can work the steps and drink. Think of that one. I don't, but I can, and that's the important thing. But step one, the magic of step one is if I'm powerless over alcohol, I'm powerless over people, places, and things in them. The magic of step one is that they're powerless over me too. As soon as I come to realize that, then the magic can happen. As soon as I come to realize that I'm powerless over them, but they are also powerless over me, I no longer have to give my power away. And that's how my life became unmanageable, by me giving my power to someone else. By giving up. By giving them, basically, when I was a kid, you'd say, how you feel? And I'd have to check. See how my dad was doing that day. If he had a good day, I had a good day. My dad got angry in the morning. I was angry all day. I took it out on everything. I didn't know how to feel. I had no defense. The steps are my defense against the dark arts, but I had no defense against how I would feel. I had no way of knowing. And so when the second part of that, my life became unmanageable because I was giving my power away. Because I was giving it to someone else. In step two, I came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Whatever it is, just something is working. And to me, at the beginning, it was the group. I went there and I just know. I don't know how it worked, but I know that when I went to a meeting, I felt better when I left. Didn't matter how angry I was when I got there, how angry I wanted to stay. Because there were times I went to meetings and I just wanted to be angry. I wanted to stay there. I wanted to just, you guys, but I went. And it didn't matter when I went, I felt better when I left. I felt better when I left a meeting. I still have that today. I feel better when I leave a meeting than when I got there. It doesn't matter how good I feel or how bad I feel when I get there. I feel better when I left. So there was something there. I don't know what it is yet. And step three, that made a decision. The story of the 3 frogs sitting on a log. One frog made a decision to jump off the log. How many frogs are left? Still 3. Didn't do anything, just made a decision. And they say, I said this once when I was talking, and some guy, asked me afterwards, well, that's wrong because Bill says it's, and I don't believe, step 3 I can do sitting down. It's not a big action. It's just making a decision. I make decisions all day long. I made a decision to stand up here, you know. And then 5 minutes later, I almost made a decision to walk out before my name was called. You know, but to me, the big decision I make with step 3 is I don't, and step 2, I don't get restored to sanity in step 2. That doesn't come till later. You know, that doesn't come till 8 and 9 when I'm doing that, when I'm doing the deal and making things right in the world. That's when my thinking starts to become better. You know, but step 3, when I make that decision, what that decision to me is I'm going to do step 4. That's my decision, but I know that there's something there that can help me. That higher power can help me get through this. I can't do step 4. And I used to, you know, when I was in relief, I did the waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, because I was afraid of 4. Everybody talks about how scary step 4 is, and we scare the hell out of newcomers because we tell them how horrible step 4 is. Step 4 is the most amazing thing you can do for yourself. It's the most amazing thing you can do, to be honest with yourself, to get over that stuff and to actually figure out who I am, who Ken is, and why, and share it with another person. And we don't do this alone. We are not a self-help group. It says in our traditions that we gather together for mutual aid. You know, and that's what I do today. You know, when I work these steps, I do them with a sponsor. I do them with other people. When I take guys through the steps, they're not doing it alone. And what I love about Al-Anon is nobody ever told me what to do. But people always told me what they did. And then I could make up my own decision on whether or not I wanted to do that. They told me what they did. And you know, I have a sponsor today. We usually meet the home group is Sunday morning. We meet for breakfast every Sunday. During Zoom, or during the first part of COVID, we weren't meeting for breakfast. Then restaurants open. We said, hey, you know what? The meeting's not open yet. We could still meet for breakfast and go home and then go on the meeting. So that's what we did. We would meet for breakfast. And then, you know, both of us get in our cars, go back home, go to the meeting. You know, and we still do that today. The meeting's going to start in just a few minutes. You know, meeting starts at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. You know, Paul goes there every week. Paul's our Canadian treasurer. We have a Canadian and an American treasurer. But step 4, man, the magic of that, and there's no, I can't tell you how to do step 4. I say ask your sponsor. I go, my wife's, like I said, also an Al-Anon, and they were doing for a couple of years, they were doing a step study every year. They do it in the winter at their meeting on an off night, and you know, there was, you know, 15, 20 people would meet and go through the steps over a period of a few months. And the one thing they always they have that they read every week is, you know, sponsor's rule. Whatever your sponsor says is the way to do this. You know, if this goes against what your sponsor says, what we're studying right here, talk to your sponsor about it and listen to them. So there's no great way, there's no perfect way to do the 4th step. There's whatever your sponsor says is what you do. And if guys want me to sponsor them, I have a specific way I go through the 4th step. But if the Blueprint for Progress or the Path to Recovery, whatever you want to do, the AA Big Book, do whatever you want to do to go through the 4th step. Just do it. And don't be afraid to do it wrong. You're going to do it again. I'm not a one and done guy with the steps. You know, and step 5, man, that relief of just, you know, finally unburdening myself, admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. It's not everything I did wrong. It's why I did them. You know, to get down to the root cause. You know, and again, and some people choose clergy or whoever you want to choose to do that, as long as they know what you're doing. As long as you know why you're doing it. That's important. That's important. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. All? I'm ready. They're not all going, guys. Don't worry. You're going to still be stuck with lots of them for a long time. And 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. And I think Bill just didn't want to repeat himself in that part. People say, what's the difference between, defects of character and shortcomings? I said, just the way you say it, you know. And how do you do that? And I have a really good friend of mine says, practice the positive opposites. If I lie, tell the truth. If I steal, stop it. You know, but just practice the positive opposite. Whatever that defect is, do the opposite. Practice it. But we practice again in step 12. We practice. We don't perfect it. I practice these things so I get better at it. And I'm a real believer in thoughts follow deeds. You know, the more good things I do, the more good things I'll think. I had a sponsor who used to tell me all the time, do the next right thing. Never once told me to think the next right thing. Just do the next right thing. Because, I really can't follow my first thought. My first thought a lot of times is still like just, But today, but I have a choice today. I didn't have a choice before. It was thought action. There was no pause. Somebody asked an AA speaker one time, what's the greatest gift you got in AA? He says, 10-second pause between what I think and what I do. Just that pause. Just that pause is what, so it's that practice, and made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. I think all is important because it's mentioned twice in that one. So it's really important that I'm thorough and I make that list and I become willing. That's all. Just become willing. And the good thing about this is there's two people I have with me, two entities or whatever. I have my sponsor and I have God with me through all these steps. I'm not doing it alone. I don't have to be fearful. If I have questions, I can ask. I can ask my sponsor, what do I do next? What's next? And that's what I do. And step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible. To such people. I always wonder what that meant. What does that mean? It means to, made direct amends to whoever, whatever, And it also means don't do the same thing again to the next person. That's part of the amends too. I have a living amends I make, to my sister every day, because when she brought me to my first meeting, I never got to thank her when she was alive for all the things she had done for me. She never continued in Alateen or Al-Anon. She never continued, but the gift she gave me continues. So I keep doing it. As a living amend. I keep doing this thing as a living amend to her too, but I do it for me. It's a selfish program. It means I have to get better before I can help someone else. And step 10, continue to take personal inventory when we're wrong, promptly admit it. And I don't do this at the end of the day. I do this through the day, throughout the day. I have a ritual in the morning when I get up. The first thing I do in the morning, and I did it this morning. I woke up. As soon as I'm conscious enough, the first thing I do is I say, God, please get into my head, my heart, and my mouth before I do. And those 3 things are important. Because my mouth, I can, my wife, sometimes she wakes up grumpy, sometimes she lets me sleep. But I have to do that. And I do that consciously every morning now. And it works great. And then I go through the other things that I do to pray and everything, the things that I do. Whatever works for me. But step 10 is a continuation throughout the whole day. And when I'm wrong, I promptly admit it. And it just saves me so much grief. And I hate making amends more than anything, so I'm really diligent about not doing that. I don't want to make amends. I hate making amends. Best way to make amends is to be aware first. Or to not make amends is to be aware first. And step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And that's what I do that on a daily basis. Sought through prayer and meditation. I do that in my mornings. And I do that. And for what? And I learned a long time ago. We used to talk about in Alateen, pray to want what I get, not to get what I want. That's a simple way for step 11. Pray to want what I get, not to get what I want. And how do I know God's will? If I can invite God to do something with me, then I'm good. If I can't make that invitation, if I can't legitimately make that invitation, or I'm kind of hesitating, not a good time. So that's how I know. And step 12 I talked about a little bit, but it's having had a spiritual awakening as the result. This is the gold thing. This is the ring we get at the end of it. The result of these steps. We tried to we tried to practice or to carry this message to others and to practice these principles. But it's the result. It's not a result. It's the thing that happens whenever we do this. And that's what happened to me. I had the awakening of the Spirit. The realization that there's nothing that's going to happen to me that me and God can't handle. Nothing. And a lot of it is because I've done the other The only reason is because I did the other 11 steps. But when we try and we practice, I keep going, and on a daily basis I try and I practice. And a lot of things have happened to me, in these rooms. Just because I work the steps doesn't mean my life's perfect. Doesn't mean there's nothing going to happen. It simply means that I'm prepared for it. I have a defense now against things like that. I have a defense against all the crap that's going to happen in my life, and a lot of things have. In 2000, I got married in 1997. I met my wife in 79 at a convention, and we got married in 79. Little dyslexic, or 97, right? Little dyslexic. So we're there though. She had to marry a couple of alcoholics first, and her parents are in AA and Al-Anon like 48 years, and I knew them first. Her mom introduced us. She just is so sorry for that. But I like to tell her she married her father twice and her mother once, 2 AAs and an Al-Anon, right? 2 alcoholics and an Al-Anon. But so we moved to the States, and I was living in Pennsylvania, and usually it's a 3.5 hour drive. It's not a big deal. But my brother called me and said, are you coming up for Easter that year? And my wife has a landscaping business. I work for her. My business card actually says operations manager / husband as my job title. And my brother called and said, you're coming up for Easter this year. And I said, yeah, I don't know. We're pretty busy, right? That's where we start. We go from 0 to 100. Oh, we're doing that this year too? We basically start April 1st. Getting a knee replacement March 27th. Yay, Ken. My wife's really happy with me. She's right out there. She'll smack me later. But I said, no, I don't think we're coming up. He goes, well, he says, we just found out Mom's got cancer, and we're going to be telling everybody on Easter. So, and I went up, and Rick was home visiting his mom. They still lived in the same street and everything, and so we went for a walk around the block. Me, Rick, and Jonathan, another Al-Anon guy, and Jonathan has since passed away. But Rick asked me, he says, how you doing? Because he knew what was going on. And I didn't realize it till right then that the magic that happens in these rooms, I didn't realize how much power working these steps had given me. And I looked at him and I said, if either one of my parents passed away today, I'd be okay. Because I'd done all the amends. I became the son I wanted to be. I was the brother I wanted to be. I was the father I wanted to be, and I was the husband I wanted to be. Everything has changed. I've gotten, worked these steps again and again since then, and things have changed. But at that point, I was okay. A year and a half later, when my mother died, I didn't like it, but I wasn't devastated. When my sister passed away, I was devastated. I was devastated because there was so much left unsaid and undone. When both my parents passed away within a couple of years, and there was nothing. My father was just an alcoholic till the day he died. But I had nothing left to say to him. I had told him that I loved him. I'd actually got the opportunity to tell him that I love him. And my father was, he was a violent alcoholic when I was young. He had a stroke in 1977 and lived till 2003. And so I don't know if he was drunk. He limped all the time. He was paralyzed on one side. Who could tell if he was drinking? And I didn't care. I didn't care. And a lot of other things have happened since then. In 2020, my brother, in May of 2020, my oldest brother passed away. And he was up here in Toronto in a hospital and everything like that. He had and he was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and it just caught up with him and everything like that. But my sister called me from the hospital and said, Gary, we're here now, and Gary's going to be going. Do you want to say anything to him? And I said, no, because everything I needed to say to my brother, I said when he was alive. I not only told him that I loved him, I showed him that I loved him. I treated him with love and respect. We got along great. We talked to each other. He would call me. And he was funny because he thinks, I would call him, and he, after 1 minute, because that's what his phone limit was. I gotta go. Okay. But I called you. You're okay to talk longer. You're not paying for it. But that's what he'd do. Okay, I gotta go. But he was just a lovely man. When my parents were both sick, my mom was sick with cancer. My brother, in the height of his alcoholism, took care of my mother for a year and a half. Went over there every day to her house, spent all day with her, helped her go to the bathroom, took her to appointments, everything. He did things that even in all my compassion and love in Al-Anon, I don't know if I could have done, and he did it. In full-blown alcoholism. And when my mother passed away, he did the same thing for my father. Who knew? Don't sell them short, man. Don't sell them short. But when my brother passed away, and we had a great relationship. My relationship with my brother was perfect because I loved him where he was at. I never tried to change him. I have 2 alcoholic sons, a stepson and a biological son. They were both in AA for a while. One was in AA. Well, he was in AA for 8 years and sober, I think, for 6. He lived with us, and he worked. He lived near us. He lived in a trailer on our property, and he worked for us. And 5 minutes. Okay, we got about 15. But if I was in AA, they would never hand me a frickin' piece of paper like this. But my son in 2020, and he was going through the motions. He was, and he was working for us, and like I said, I told my wife, I said, well, he's not moving in with us, so he did, naturally, and we, one day we found some paraphernalia at the barn, and that night he came home and he's getting ready to go, he's got his backpack ready, he's going out to his sponsors to go over the book, 'cause that's what he's doing, he's going through the motions for us, and dying inside, and he, we said, hey, he said, yep, that's true. I said, well, you're out. Kicked him out and fired him that day. And he said, okay, grabbed some more stuff and just left. And we watched him almost die that summer. Living outside, sleeping on a tarp on the ground. And behind our barn, we finally said, you can't do that. Guys come to work here. You can't be here. And, so, God knows what was going on. But he eventually came back to work, and he's not doing the drugs anymore, but he's still drinking. And he works for us. And my parameter is, as long as his alcoholism doesn't affect his work, it's none of my business. We have a saying here called the first 5 words in Al-Anon that I'm trying to promote, for lack of a better word. But if my name's not in the first 5 words of a problem I bring to my sponsor, it's none of my business. And I'm not allowed to cheat, because I will cheat. I will put my name there. But if my name's not in the first 5 words, none of my business. And that came about through a step study group. My other son also lives in London, Ontario, and he went back out. He was in AA a year and a half. COVID came, lost his support system, and just back out still. I like to say that I got one son that won't talk to me and one that won't shut up. And the one in London, right, like he won't answer calls or texts or anything like that. So I call him or text him every couple of weeks and just say, hey, I love you. Hope you're okay. And when I go up to London, I go and see him because I have a granddaughter up there too and stuff. So we go and visit and say hi and but I'll stop by. And I always tell my granddaughter, I said, what are you going to do when you see your dad? She goes, give him a hug until he's uncomfortable and tell him it's from you. So that's what she does. But we have a group called the First 5 Words, and I'm going to go almost pretty quick through this stuff. The first 5 words is, I have a step study group that I did, and we did 26 months we went through the steps. There's 5 of us. There's me, there was a guy from Toronto, a guy from Texas, a guy from Florida, and a guy from Australia. Right? And we went for 26 months every Friday night, Saturday morning in Australia. And we went through a step study. And we just absolutely thrived, these guys. And the guy from Australia, and I put these guys together, like Olaf had said, hey, I want to do a step study. So I called these other guys and said, you want to do it? Because I'd seen them in Zoom meetings, never met them in person. And Jeremy, when he started with us, never had a sponsor, never worked through the steps. Well, we're doing a study. We're not, And so Jeremy has now gone, got a sponsor, going through the steps in Australia with a sponsor there. And last year came to visit us. Came over for 3 weeks to visit. Because we want that connection. We talk about that human connection, and Zoom is great, but that human connection, he made that trip to come and visit us, to hang out with the other first 5 words guys. And he stayed at my house for 3 weeks. But the day before he got there, I went into the hospital. This is going to be a 5-minute story max. So I had some health issues last year, and I went into the hospital. And I went into the hospital on a Wednesday. I had some issues the week before. I went to the doctor, blood pressure medication. And in the States, it's really easy. Blood pressure medication, $15. ER visit, $750 copay. So I made my medical decision based on finances, which is not always the best thing to do, because a week later I went to the ER. And on the Wednesday night, went into the hospital and ended up staying in there for 5 days. So Jeremy calls me, and luckily I got my Wi-Fi going in the hospital, and Jeremy calls me on Thursday night and goes, "Mike, I'm in Buffalo. Where are you?" I said, "Well, I got bad news and good news. Bad news is I'm in the hospital. I'm not picking you up. Good news is my wife's there somewhere looking for you. I've sent her a picture of you, and here's a picture of her." They've never met, never seen each other on Zoom, nothing, right? So they're both in Al-Anon. I figured that's okay, right? Hell, I'd have done it. Well, so would she. And they had a great time for 4 days while I was in the hospital. First day I meet Jeremy. He comes into the hospital. Finally got a room on Friday, right? So I call Liz and say, "Hey, yeah, we got a room. So here's what it is." And meanwhile, while they're coming in, I go to get some tests done. So the first time I meet my friend Jeremy from Australia, Jem as we call him, "Mate." And there's different ways to say mate. You can say mate, mate, like mate. All kinds of, it means a lot. And so the first time I meet my mate, they're wheeling me back to the thing on a gurney, and I get up, hospital gown. I have to get up. Jeremy's behind me, takes a picture. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But here's the thing. Now, when I'm in the hospital for 5 days, and a lot of stuff went on, and a lot of stuff that could have killed me, my kidneys backed up and high blood pressure and all stuff because of, guys, if you want to talk to me about this later, I'll tell you all the things to look for, and you can save yourself a lot of stress and maybe even save your life. Because I ended up with, I had 5 strokes, all this stuff, and all the things the doctors are telling me are things that can kill me. All the things they're telling me are things that can hurt me. And never mind that, the next week, we're having the Harvest of Hope at my place, the world famous International Harvest of Hope, a big convention we have at our place, with 300 to 400 people coming to my house. Well, not my house, my backyard. I have a big backyard. Yeah, Ray's going to speak there this year. But what's amazing is, and what the power of this thing is, and the faith that I've gained in here, is that in those 5 days that I was in the hospital, and I went to some meetings too, I went to my Sunday morning meeting, and I had my camera off and everything, and they're going, "Ken, why's your camera off?" Right? I'm in the hospital. Here I am in a hospital gown. Here, you guys want to see? Go ahead. I didn't turn around because pants were not optional on that meeting. But the 5 days in the hospital, I had no fear. I had no fear of what was going to happen, what was going to turn out. And when it was all things that were just really serious things, all happened to me. And I don't remember 1 ounce of fear in 5 days. It was just when the doctors came in, okay, what's next? What's next? What's the next right thing to do? I treated doctors like I did my sponsor. What do I do next? When I went to the urologist and he told me, he goes, "Well, there's a couple of options." I said, "Stop." I said, "What's the best thing to do? What would you do? You've got the experience. What would you do?" And he told me. I said, "Okay, we're going to do that." And they all say, "Boy, I wish all my patients were like that." And because of this program, when I was in the hospital too, it doesn't matter what, nurse coming in and give me a catheter, thank you. You know, nobody thanks people for a catheter. It's funny because I was talking, Rick, when he used to talk, he used to say, he says, I have, 3 resentments when I get up here. First is, I have to go to the bathroom and you don't. I'm nervous and you're not. I have to go to the bathroom and you don't. And you can go and I can't. And then he said they should invent a speaker beaker. That's a catheter. They've got it. I'm not wearing one right now. But I just want to say this has been really exciting for me, again, because of my history here. 53 years since my first ORC, and I finally get to speak here in the big room. And I'm just so thrilled that you guys could all make it this morning. And I truly do love you all. And my friends that showed up from all over the place, thanks. Squire, always a pleasure, man.